The champagne flute didn't
What a
shatter when it hit
magnificent
the floor.
Indeed,
It
the chandeliers
bounced
are breathtaking.
once, twice, 3 times on the Persian rug, spilling gold liquid like arterial spray across cream silk. The woman who dropped it didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She just stared at the puddle with eyes that had seen things that made broken glass irrelevant. That was the first sign the wedding at Blackwood Estate wasn't a celebration. It was a hunting ground. Most people think monsters look like monsters. Fangs, claws, eyes that glow in the dark. They don't. They look like the tech mogul in the Italian suit adjusting his cufflinks with fingers that never tremble. They look like the shipping heiress in the Vera Wang gown, smiling with teeth too white, too perfect. They look like the 300 guests filling the Gothic ballroom, whispering in voices that don't quite reach human frequencies. Ivy Harlow was just a waitress, 26 years old, 5 years working high-end catering in New York City, invisible to the billionaires and socialites who treated her like furniture with legs. She was supposed to serve the wine, collect the tips, and disappear before anyone remembered her face. But then he walked in. Theron Ashcroft, a man feared by things that go bump in the night. He grabbed her wrist in a hallway where the air smelled like copper and expensive cologne, pulled her close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin, and whispered 7 words that changed her life forever. Act like you belong to me. She didn't know it then, but saying yes was the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. Because when he slid that black diamond ring onto her finger, the metal tightened, warmed, fused to her skin with magic older than the stone walls around them. 3 hours later, she went from invisible worker to High Queen, the only person in the vampire world with the authority to command a king. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait to be chosen. She conquered, and the people who treated her like she was worthless, who never even looked her in the eye, they would kneel. This is how it happened. Ivy's alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. The same broken buzz that had been waking her for 3 years, ever since the clock radio's snooze button stopped working. She didn't hit it anymore. Just reached over in the dark and yanked the plug from the wall. Silence rushed back into the tiny Queen's apartment. Through the paper-thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Chen's television. Always on, always too loud. Judge Judy screaming about unpaid loans and broken promises. Ivy knew about both. She sat up slowly, feeling the familiar ache in her lower back. 5 years of carrying trays. 5 years of standing in heels on marble floors, smiling at people who looked through her like she was made of glass. The student loan statement sat in a stack on her kitchen counter. $87,000. Columbia University. Degree in hospitality management that qualified her to serve appetizers to people who made more in an hour than she'd make in a year. The math was simple, brutal, inescapable. Rent $1,800 a month for 400 square feet. Her mother's medication, $600. Utilities, groceries, the minimum payment on the loans that would follow her to the grave. She worked 3 jobs, catering on weekends, coffee shop Monday through Wednesday, transcription work when she couldn't sleep, typing other people's words for 9 cents a minute. She was 26 years old and so tired the exhaustion had weight. But today was different. Today was the Wolf Sinclair wedding, Blackwood Estate, Hudson Valley. The kind of event where tips alone could cover 2 months of rent. If she was lucky, if she smiled enough, if she stayed invisible. Ivy was very good at being invisible. She showered in 3 minutes, dressed in the black slacks and white button-down that every catering company required. Hair pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her a headache. No jewelry except the small silver cross her mother had given her when she turned 18. No perfume, no makeup beyond concealer to hide the shadows under her eyes. The subway platform was empty at 5:15. Just her and a man in a security uniform, both waiting for the M train that rattled through the tunnel like it was held together with prayer. Ivy leaned against a pillar and checked her phone. One message, her mother. "Good luck today, sweetheart. I'm praying for you." Ivy's throat tightened. She typed back quickly. "Love you, Mom. Taking care of that prescription today. Promise." She'd been promising for 3 weeks. Ren Harlow's heart medication cost $600 a month, and insurance covered exactly none of it. This wedding would fix that, had to fix that, because if it didn't, the train screeched into the station. Ivy got on, didn't think about the alternative. Blackwood Estate sat on 200 acres of forest in the Hudson Valley, 3 hours north of the city. The house itself was a Gothic monstrosity, all dark stone and tower spires that clawed at the sky like something out of a Bronte novel or a horror movie. Ivy couldn't decide which. The catering van dropped her and 11 other servers at the service entrance at 9 in the morning. A staff manager was waiting. Rourke, 50-something Irish accent fading after 30 years in America, perpetually exhausted expression that said he'd seen everything and trusted none of it. Listen up. His voice cut through the morning air like a whip crack. This is not a normal event. These are not normal guests. You will be professional. You will be invisible. You will not make eye contact. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will serve smile and disappear. Understood. 11 heads nodded. Ivy felt something cold slide down her spine. The way Rourke said "not normal" didn't sound like a figure of speech. It sounded like a warning. They filed into the estate through the kitchen. Industrial. Massive. The kind of space that could serve 1,000 people without breaking a sweat. Chefs were already working preparing canapes that looked like tiny works of art. Beef tartare on black bread, raw oysters on ice, rare tuna so fresh it still glistened. No vegetables, no salads, nothing cooked beyond a slight sear. Ivy noticed. She always noticed things. It was a survival skill learned from years of reading rooms, anticipating needs before guests realized they had them. But this felt different, wrong in a way she couldn't name. Harlow, she turned. Rourke was holding a tray of champagne flutes. Crystal. Expensive enough that dropping one would cost her a week's pay. Ballroom, east side, offer drinks. Do not linger, do not engage. Clear. Clear. She took the tray, felt the weight settle into her arms, shoulders, core. 5 years of muscle memory. She could carry this for hours without spilling a drop. The hallway from the kitchen to the ballroom was lined with portraits. Old oil paintings in gilded frames. Men and women in clothes from centuries past staring down with expressions that ranged from contempt to hunger. Ivy kept her eyes forward, ignored the way the painted gazes seemed to follow her. The ballroom doors were 12 feet tall, carved oak with iron hinges that looked like they belonged in a medieval castle. 2 security guards stood on either side, both over 6 feet, both watching her with the kind of focus that made her skin prickle. She walked past them, through the doors, and stopped. The ballroom was enormous. Vaulted ceilings, chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught the light and scattered it like diamonds. 300 guests in black tie and evening gowns, standing in small clusters, speaking in low murmurs that didn't quite sound like conversation. More like negotiation. Strategy. The plotting of moves on a board Ivy couldn't see. She'd worked hundreds of events like this. Weddings, galas, charity auctions where people bid 6 figures on wine they'd never drink. But she'd never felt an atmosphere like this. Cold. That was the first thing she noticed. The room was cold despite the lit fireplaces. The champagne in her hands was chilled, but the air around her felt colder. Silent. 300 people and the noise level barely reached a murmur. No laughter, no clinking glasses. No drunk uncle telling inappropriate jokes, just whispers and stares. Hungry. That was the word that kept circling in Ivy's mind. These people looked hungry. Not for food, for something else. Something that made her want to turn around, walk out, keep walking until she hit the highway. But she needed the money. So she smiled, fixed that practiced grimace on her face, the one she'd perfected over 5 years of serving people who didn't see her, and started offering champagne. Sir. The man was tall, mid-40s maybe, silver at his temples. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than Ivy's car. His hand when he reached for the glass was ice cold, literally, like he'd been holding his fingers in a freezer. Thank you, he said. His voice was pleasant enough, but his eyes didn't move. They stayed locked on her throat, on the pulse beating just beneath her skin. Ivy stepped back, moved on. Next guest, then the next. Each interaction identical. Cold hands, staring eyes, voices that spoke politely but felt wrong like they were reading from scripts. She was halfway through the tray when she saw the bride. Cassandra Wolfe, shipping heiress, old money going back 6 generations. She wore a white gown that probably required a team of people to get her into all lace and pearls, and a train that trailed behind her like a river of silk. Beautiful, objectively, undeniably beautiful. But there was something about her smile that made Ivy think of sharks. The groom stood beside her. Draven Sinclair, tech mogul, 37 according to the tabloids, though he looked younger. Too young, skin too smooth, eyes too bright. He had his hand on Cassandra's lower back, possessive and cold. Ivy didn't approach them. She knew her place. The bride and groom didn't drink champagne offered by waitresses. They had personal attendants for that. She was turning away when she saw the mirror. There were 3 of them. Enormous gilded mirrors placed strategically around the ballroom, reflecting the guests, the chandeliers, the opulence. But something was off. Ivy paused, pretending to adjust the glasses on her tray. Look closer. The reflections were wrong. The man in the corner, the one laughing with a woman in emerald green in the mirror, his face was slack, empty. His eyes, hollow pits. The woman beside him smiling with perfect white teeth in the mirror, her mouth was open too wide. Her jaw unhinged like a snake preparing to swallow prey whole. Ivy blinked, looked again. Normal. Everything looked normal. She felt her heart rate spike, told herself she was tired, overworked, seeing things that weren't there because she'd been up since 4:30 and her brain was playing tricks. But the cold remained, and the hunger. More champagne, a voice behind her. Ivy turned. A woman in her 60s, diamonds at her throat, staring at the tray with an expression that looked more like disgust than interest. Of course, Ivy offered a glass. The woman took it, didn't drink, just held it while her eyes stayed fixed on Ivy's face, studying, memorizing. You're new, the woman said. I'm with the catering staff, ma'am. The woman's nostrils flared slightly, like she was smelling something. Lavender and fear. Ivy's hand trembled, just once, just enough that the glasses on the tray clinked together, a tiny sound that shouldn't have mattered. But in the silent ballroom, it rang out like a bell. 50 heads turned, 50 pairs of eyes locked onto her. And Ivy realized with sudden visceral certainty that Rourke's warning hadn't been about etiquette. It had been about survival. Ivy backed away slowly, kept the smile frozen on her face, pretended she didn't notice the way conversations had stopped. The way guests were watching her like wolves watching a rabbit that had strayed too far from the burrow. Her earpiece crackled. Rourke's voice sharp and urgent. Harlow, East Wing VIP Lounge. Someone spilled red wine on the white furniture. Get there now. She didn't need to be told twice. Ivy ducked through a side door, grateful for the excuse to leave the ballroom. The hallway was quieter, dimmer. The air here smelled different, metallic, like old pennies and something sweeter she couldn't name. The VIP lounge was at the end of the hall behind heavy oak doors with brass handles shaped like ravens. Ivy pushed through trays still balanced in one hand and stopped. The room was empty except for the furniture. White velvet couches arranged around a marble fireplace. And yes, there was a stain. Dark red, too dark to be wine. It looked almost black against the pristine fabric. Ivy set down her tray and pulled cleaning supplies from her apron. Knelt beside the couch. The stain was still wet, fresh. She could smell it now, that metallic sweetness. Not wine, blood. The door clicked shut behind her. Ivy's head snapped up. A man stood there leaning against the door, locking it with one smooth motion. He wasn't a guest she recognized from the tabloids. Tall, dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble. Sharp angles, strong jaw, eyes so dark they were almost black. But it was his presence that stole the air from the room. He radiated something cold and ancient and utterly terrifying. Power without mercy, strength without restraint. He was bleeding. A slow trickle of crimson ran from his temple, staining the collar of his white shirt. Serpam. Ivy stood slowly still, holding the rag. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Are you injured? I can call security. He laughed, low, humorless. The sound made her ribs vibrate. Security is the reason I'm bleeding, darling. He took a step toward her. Ivy took a step back. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. Who are you? She demanded, trying to sound braver than she felt. Someone who walked into a trap. His eyes scanned the room, then locked onto her. He didn't look at her the way the other guests had, like she was furniture. He looked at her like she was a puzzle, a problem, something unexpected. You're the waitress, the one who smells like lavender and survival instinct. Ivy frowned. Excuse me. Before she could react, the door handle jiggled violently. Someone was trying to break in. Heavy thuds slammed against the wood. A voice roared from the hallway, fury and violence packed into two words. Open up! The stranger winced. He looked at Ivy, assessing her in a split second, the way a general might assess terrain before a battle. Listen to me very carefully. His voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to vibrate in her bones. In about 10 seconds, that door is going to splinter. The men behind it want to stake me through the heart and mount my head on the wall. If they find me alone, I die. If they find me with a hostage, they'll kill us both to be thorough. I don't understand. But he continued, closing the distance between them in a blur of motion that her eyes couldn't quite track. Suddenly, he was inches from her face. She could feel the cold radiating off him like he'd been carved from ice. If they find me with a guest, a lover, they hesitate. Politics, you see. Even monsters have rules. Crack. The door frame splintered. His hands shot out, gripping her waist. The touch was iron-hard, unbreakable. He pulled her close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his dark eyes. Act like you're with me, he commanded. His voice wasn't cruel. It was desperate. Smile, laugh, look at me like I'm the only man in the world. Do it and you leave this house with $10 million. Fail and we both die here. $10 million. That was rent for a lifetime. Her mother's medication forever. Every student loan paid in full. Freedom. The door burst open. Ivy didn't have time to think. Adrenaline hijacked her brain. Some primal part of her that had kept her ancestors alive in caves and forests, that knew how to run from predators, that understood survival came before pride, that part took over. She threw her arms around his neck, buried her fingers in his hair, and laughed. Bright, bubbly, completely fake. Oh, stop it, you tease, loud enough for the intruders to hear. She grabbed the cleaning rag from her pocket and dabbed at the blood on his temple, smiled like her life depended on it. I told you that earring was too sharp when I kissed you there. The room went dead silent. Draven Sinclair stood in the doorway, two security guards behind him. Both men looked like they could bench press cars. Their eyes glowed with a faint amber light that shouldn't have been possible, that violated every law of biology Ivy had ever learned. Draven's eyes flickered, confused, returning to human brown as he looked from the stranger to the waitress in his arms. Theron. The name came out like venom. We didn't realize you had company. Theron, so that was his name. Theron smiled. It was a shark's smile. He pulled Ivy tighter against his side, his hand resting possessively on her hip. The touch felt wrong, too cold, too strong, but she leaned into it because the alternative was explaining why she was really here. Draven, Theron drawled. Meet Ivy, my +1. I hope you don't mind. We were just getting reacquainted. Ivy looked up at him, forced herself to maintain the smile even though her heart was racing so fast she thought she might pass out. Then she looked at Draven. The groom didn't look like a tech mogul anymore. He looked like a predator who just missed a kill. Hungry, furious. A waitress, Draven sneered, spotting her uniform. How progressive of you. She enjoys the role play. Theron's lie came smooth as silk. He looked down at Ivy, his eyes dark and compelling. Don't you, my love? Her mouth was dry. Her palms were sweating. But some part of her, the part that had learned to smile through degradation, to nod through insults, to survive 5 years of being treated like she didn't matter, that part knew exactly what to say. It pays the bills, she quipped. Prayed she hadn't just signed her death warrant. Theron's lips twitched. He liked that. Shall we join the reception? He asked, steering her toward the broken door, forcing Draven to step aside. I believe the toast is starting, and I'd hate to miss your speech, Draven. They walked past the groom, past the two guards with their glowing eyes. Ivy felt a wave of pure malice rolling off Draven like heat from asphalt in summer. She was walking into the lion's den, holding the hand of a man who was either her savior or her executioner. She didn't know which. But as they stepped out of the VIP lounge and back into the hum of the reception, as Theron's grip tightened on her hand, she realized something that made her blood run cold. Whatever Theron was, whatever Draven and his guards were, it wasn't human. And she'd just agreed to play a game where the rules were written in blood. The moment they entered the ballroom, Theron didn't let go. If anything, his grip tightened. His fingers laced through hers, cold and unbreakable. Keep walking, he murmured, lips barely moving. Don't look at your feet. Look at everyone like you own them. You're bleeding on your collar, Ivy whispered back, forcing a smile at a passing elderly woman who was eyeing them with open suspicion. It adds to the rogue charm. They entered the grand ballroom. The sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns parted slightly as they passed. But now, with Theron's arm around her, Ivy saw things she hadn't noticed when she was serving drinks. She noticed how the guests moved too gracefully, almost gliding across the marble floor, like their feet didn't quite touch the ground. She noticed the food on the tables, all of it rare. The beef tartare, the tuna, the oysters, everything raw or barely cooked. The vegetable platters sat untouched. Garnish, decoration, nothing more. And she noticed how everyone stopped and stared when Theron entered. It wasn't respect. It was fear. Why are they looking at us like that? Ivy asked quietly. Because Ivy, Theron grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter who looked shocked to see her on the other side of the dynamic. I am not supposed to be here. I am the king of a clan they thought they wiped out 50 years ago, and you are holding my hand, which makes you either very brave or very foolish. Ivy stopped walking, tried to pull away. Okay, cut the act. Is this some mafia thing? Because if it is, I'm out. Theron pulled her into a quiet alcove near the orchestra, spun her to face a mirror. Look at them, Ivy. Really look. She looked into the reflection of the room. At a table near the center, a woman was laughing, young, beautiful, red dress cut low enough to be scandalous. In the mirror, her reflection wasn't laughing. Her reflection's face was slack, empty, eyes hollow like a skull. Ivy gasped, blinked. The image normalized. The woman was laughing again. The glamour doesn't work well in silver-backed mirrors, Theron explained calmly. You're in a room full of vampires, Ivy. The Sinclair and Wolf families aren't merging shipping lanes. They're merging bloodlines to overthrow the treaty that's kept the East Coast clans from war for a century. Ivy stared at him. She wanted to laugh, wanted to call him insane, wanted to walk out and never look back. But she remembered Draven's glowing eyes, the cold hands, the way the guest stared at her throat, the mirrors that lied. You're insane, she whispered. I'm rich. I'm immortal, and currently I'm the only thing standing between you and Draven, serving you as the main course. Theron's voice was quiet, serious. He knows you saw his eyes change. He knows you saw him hunting me. If I let you go, you won't make it to the parking lot. Cold sweat broke out across Ivy's back. So what do? You act. Theron reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, flipped it open. Inside sat a ring, a massive rough-cut black diamond set in ancient silver. The stone seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Looking at it made Ivy's eyes hurt. Put this on. I'm not marrying you. It's not a proposal, it's a shield. He held the ring up to the light. The diamond pulsed with a faint inner glow. That is the sigil of the Ashcroft line. As long as you wear it, you are under my protection. By ancient law, they cannot touch what belongs to a king. Ivy hesitated. She looked across the room. Draven was whispering to Cassandra. The bride looked up, her eyes locking onto Ivy with the intensity of a sniper scope. Her tongue darted out, licked her lips, like she was tasting the air. Tasting Ivy. Ivy snatched the ring and shoved it onto her finger. It was heavy, strangely warm despite the cold metal. The moment it settled into place, she felt it tighten. Just slightly, just enough to notice. Good girl, Theron said. Don't call me that. Fair enough. He smiled. Ready for round two. He led her onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing something heavy and classical. A waltz that felt more like a funeral march. Theron placed one hand on her waist, took her right hand in his left, and they danced. Ivy had never waltzed in her life, but Theron moved with a fluidity that was impossible, guiding her across the floor so perfectly that she felt like she'd been dancing her whole life. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Her feet followed his without conscious thought. You're trembling, Theron noted. I'm terrified. So you're a king. Where's your crown? I don't wear crowns. I collect debts, and the Wolf family owes me a blood debt from 1924. The music stopped. The room went silent. Draven had taken the stage. He tapped a spoon against a glass. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed without a microphone. Unnatural. Enhanced. Brothers and sisters of the night, we are honored to have a surprise guest this evening, the legendary Theron Ashcroft. Every head turned toward them. Draven continued, cruel smile playing on his lips. And his human companion. The word human hung in the air like a curse. The hunger in the room spiked. Ivy could feel it, a collective pressure. Hundreds of eyes focused on her jugular, on the pulse beating just beneath her skin. She understood now. She was the only prey animal in a room full of predators. Theron, Draven called out, since you have graced us with your presence, surely you will join us for the unity toast. We have a special vintage prepared. Waiters began circulating, not the catering staff Ivy had come with. Different people, moving too smoothly, carrying trays of dark, viscous red liquid in crystal glasses. It wasn't wine, it was too thick. A waiter stopped in front of Theron and Ivy, sneered as he offered the tray. For the lady. Theron took 2 glasses, handed one to Ivy. Don't drink it, he whispered, barely audible. Just hold it. What is it? She could smell copper, metal, life. Blood, Theron said grimly, but it's spiked with verbena and wolfsbane. Poison to me, hallucinogen for you. They're trying to force my hand. From the stage, Draven raised his glass. To Theron Ashcroft, may he live Interestingly, the crowd began to chant, "Drink, drink, drink." The pressure was suffocating. If Theron didn't drink, he insulted the host, a breach of their laws. If he did drink, he would be weakened enough for Draven to kill him. Theron raised the glass to his lips. Ivy's hand shot out, grabbed his wrist. The room gasped. "My darling is on medication," Ivy announced loudly. Her voice shook but projected across the silent ballroom. "He can't mix it with vintage." She looked Draven dead in the eye, channeled every ounce of rage she felt at being hunted, at being treated like meat. And as for me, Ivy deliberately tilted her hand, poured the blood onto the pristine white marble floor. The silence that followed was deafening. She had just insulted the host, spilled ceremonial blood, declared war. Theron looked at her. For the first time, the mask of the cool, detached king slipped. He looked impressed. Then he whispered two words. "Run." "What? You just started a war." He grabbed her hand. "Run!" Theron threw his glass at the nearest chandelier. Crystal shattered. Sparks rained down on the crowd. The lights flickered and died. Chaos erupted. But the darkness wasn't empty. It was alive with sounds, ripping silk, snapping bone, screams cut short, the wet sound of things tearing that shouldn't tear, and laughter, cold, hungry, hunting. Theron pulled Ivy through the chaos. She couldn't see, could barely breathe, but she felt his hand iron strong dragging her forward. They hit a wall, a door, fresh air. They were in a hallway, running. Behind them, the ballroom devoured itself, and Ivy realized she'd just traded one nightmare for another, because the man pulling her through the dark wasn't human. The ring on her finger was growing warmer, tighter, and when she tried to pull it off, her skin burned. The ring wouldn't come off. Theron skidded to a stop, shoved her into a library, slammed the door, dragged a massive mahogany desk in front of it with one hand, a desk that must have weighed 400 pounds. Ivy stared. "What are you?" He turned to face her. In the dim light from the fireplace, his eyes reflected like a cat's, inhuman, ancient. "I already told you," Theron said quietly. "I'm a vampire, king of the Ashcroft clan, 200 years old. And as of 3 minutes ago," he gestured to the ring on her finger, "your husband." Ivy looked down. The black diamond was pulsing, a faint, rhythmic inner light, like a heartbeat. "Take it off," she said. "I can't." "Take it off." She yanked at the ring. It wouldn't budge. The metal had tightened around her finger, fused to her skin. She could feel it now, warm and alive, like it had roots growing into her bone. "It's a blood oath," Theron explained. He wasn't mocking her. He sounded tired, genuinely sorry. "An ancient marriage rite. The ring binds your life force to mine. It allows me to draw on your strength if I'm injured. It allows you to sense where I am. It's a partnership, a bond. You married me." Ivy's voice came out flat, shock settling over her like snow. "You married me without asking. I saved you." His eyes flashed. "Draven was going to kill you the moment he realized you were human. As my wife under the oath, you are untouchable by vampire law. If they harm you, they declare war on every clan loyal to Ashcroft. It's the only reason you're still breathing. So I'm a human shield." "No." Theron stepped closer. His fingers grazed her jawline. The touch sent electricity down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "You are the only person in this house who stood up for me. You poured that glass on the floor. You chose a side. That makes you a partner." Bang! Something slammed into the library door. The heavy desk slid an inch across the floor. A voice taunted from the hallway. High, sweet, terrifying. "Theron, darling, come out. Draven is very upset about the chandelier. And I'm very hungry. I bet that little waitress tastes like fear and cheap perfume." Cassandra, the bride. Theron stood, grabbed an iron fire poker from the hearth. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Ivy looked around frantically, found a heavy silver candlestick, grabbed it like a weapon. "What are we going to do?" Theron looked at her, at the ring on her finger, at the woman who'd poured blood on marble floors and declared war without flinching. "We're going to break the rules," he said, "and we're going to survive." The door splintered, and Ivy Harlow, 26-year-old waitress, with $87,000 in student debt, realized her life had just changed forever. For better or worse, she was bound to a vampire king, and there was no going back. The door didn't break all at once. It splintered in stages like bones fracturing under pressure. First the frame cracked, then the hinges groaned, then wood began to splinter inward, razor-sharp shards raining onto the Persian rug. Ivy pressed her back against the bookshelf. The silver candlestick felt pathetically inadequate in her hands. What was she supposed to do with this? Hit a vampire? A creature that could tear through oak doors like tissue paper. Theron stood between her and the disintegrating entrance. The fire poker in his hand looked almost elegant, like a weapon from another century, which Ivy supposed it probably was. When they come through, he said quietly, stay low, don't run. Running triggers the hunting instinct. What triggers the not killing us instinct? Ivy's voice came out higher than she intended. Nothing. Theron glanced back at her. His eyes had changed. The whites were darker, the irises reflecting firelight like an animal's. These aren't people anymore, Ivy. They've been starved for this event. Draven promised them fresh blood. You're the only human in the house. The door exploded inward. 3 figures rushed through the opening. Too fast, moving in that blur of motion that Ivy's eyes couldn't quite track. 1 second they were across the room. The next they were on Theron. He moved faster. The poker swung in an arc that whistled through the air, connected with the first attacker's skull with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a melon. The vampire went down, not dead but stunned. Theron didn't pause. He spun using the momentum to drive the poker through the second attacker's shoulder, pinning him to the wall. The third vampire lunged for Ivy. She didn't think, just swung the candlestick with everything she had. The heavy silver base connected with the vampire's nose. There was a sizzling sound like bacon hitting a hot pan. Smoke rose from the contact point. The vampire screamed and stumbled back, hands clutching his face. It works, Ivy yelled. Silver works. It's silver-plated. Theron shouted back, snapping the neck of the first attacker. Not lethal for vampires, but it would keep him down for a few minutes. Not lethal, but annoying. Good job. He grabbed the third vampire by the throat, lifted him off the ground with one hand and threw him into a bookshelf. The wood collapsed. Books rained down like hail. For a moment, the room was quiet except for their breathing. While Ivy's breathing, Theron didn't seem to need air. Then Cassandra's voice drifted through the broken doorway. Sweet as poisoned honey. Theron, darling, that was impressive. But we have 200 more where those came from. You can't fight forever, especially not while protecting your little pet. Theron's jaw tightened. He looked around the library, assessing. There's another way out. Where he crossed to the far bookshelf, ran his fingers along the spines until he found what he was looking for. Dante's Inferno. He pulled it. A section of shelving clicked. Swung inward, a secret passage. Of course there's a secret passage, Ivy muttered. Because apparently this is my life now. After you, my queen. Ivy glared at him. If we survive this, I'm keeping the ring and selling it. Deal. She ducked into the passage. It was narrow, damp, and smelled like earth and old stone. The kind of place where spiders built kingdoms and rats held court. Ivy pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight. The weak beam barely penetrated the darkness. Behind her, Theron pulled the bookshelf closed. The clicking of the mechanism sounded very final. Where does this go? Ivy asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Down. Theron moved past her in the narrow space. In the phone's glow, his face looked harder, older. The service levels, kitchen, pantry, cellar. I need to get to the cellar. Why power 'em? Because there's a runestone down there. It's powering the perimeter ward that's trapping us on the estate. Destroy it and we can drive out of here. Ivy followed him down the stone steps. They were uneven, worn smooth by centuries of feet. How old was this house? How long had vampires been using it? You said something about 1924. She said, needing to hear a human voice, even if it was her own. Theron was quiet for so long Ivy thought he wouldn't answer. Then the Sinclair clan invited mine to a peace summit. My parents, my siblings, 50 members of our bloodline. All the old families were there. It was supposed to end the territorial wars. His voice went flat, empty. They barricaded the doors, set the building on fire. Vampires can't die from fire, but we can burn, for hours, until there's nothing left but ash and agony. Ivy's throat tightened. How did you survive? I was late. I'd stopped to feed on the way, heard the screaming from half a mile away. He paused on the stairs. I spent 70 years hunting the ones responsible. Draven's father was one of them. I killed him in 1996, drained him dry, and left his corpse in Times Square on New Year's Eve. Jesus. No, just me. They reached the bottom of the stairs. Theron cracked the door open, peered into the space beyond. Ivy could smell food. Cooking meat and something floral. Kitchen herbs, maybe. Stay close, he whispered. We need to cross the kitchen to reach the pantry. The cellar access is there. The kitchen was massive, industrial, stainless steel counters gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. And people. 5 or 6 catering staff, including Rourke, huddled in the corner. Human, confused, probably thinking the power outage upstairs was just an electrical problem. They had no idea. Theron and Ivy stepped out of the passage. Rourke spotted her immediately. "Harlow, where the hell have you been?" He marched over, face red with stress and anger. "The guests are screaming. The lights are out in the ballroom and you're wandering around with—" He looked at Theron, saw the blood on his collar, the fire poker still in his hand. "With a guest." "Rourke, listen to me." Ivy grabbed his arm. "You need to get the staff out. Loading dock. Right now. Don't be ridiculous. We have a wedding cake to cut." The swinging doors to the dining hall burst open. 3 men in tuxedos entered, but they weren't men anymore. Their eyes glowed amber. Their mouths were open too wide, showing too many teeth. They moved like wolves stalking prey. One of them sniffed the air. His head snapped toward Theron. "Found him!" Rourke froze, stared. His face went white as paper. "Run," Ivy said. "What? Run." The lead vampire lunged, covered 20 feet in a heartbeat. But Theron was faster. He intercepted the attacker midair, tackling him into a rack of pots and pans. The crash was deafening, metal clanging like church bells in hell. The other two rushed forward. Ivy didn't think. She raised the silver candlestick and swung at the nearest vampire's face. The base connected with his cheekbone. More sizzling, more screaming. Silver burned them. It actually worked. The third vampire grabbed her from behind, arm around her throat, squeezing. Ivy couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. Black spots danced in her vision. Then Theron was there. He grabbed the vampire by the hair, yanked him backward with enough force to tear him away from Ivy. Spun him around, snapped his neck in one smooth motion. The vampire crumpled. Theron caught Ivy as her legs gave out. "You okay?" She nodded, couldn't speak yet. Her throat felt crushed. The first vampire was getting up from the pots and pans. Theron didn't give him a chance. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, picked up the vampire and threw him into the industrial freezer. Slammed the heavy door, spun the lock wheel, muffled screaming from inside, pounding on metal. "That won't hold him long," Theron said. "Maybe 20 minutes. Rourke was pressed against the wall, shaking. The other catering staff had already fled. Smart people. "The cellar," Theron said to Ivy. Now they ran through the pantry. Shelves of caviar and truffles, champagne and imported oils. Luxury food for monsters who didn't eat it. Theron kicked open a wooden hatch in the floor. A ladder descended into darkness. "Go," he said. "I'm right behind you." Ivy climbed down. The rungs were slick with condensation. The air grew colder with each step. This wasn't a wine cellar. It was something older, deeper. The walls were earth and stone carved directly into bedrock. Theron dropped down beside her. He looked paler than before. The fight had drained him. "You okay?" Ivy asked, echoing his earlier question. "I need blood." His voice was tight, controlled. "But I can wait." "How long?" "Oh, long enough." The cavern stretched ahead of them, lit by a faint purple glow from deeper in. Ivy could hear water dripping, the scuttle of things in the dark. "The rune stone is ahead," Theron said. "We destroy it, the ward falls, and we can leave." They ran through the cavern. Ivy's phone flashlight bounced off damp walls. Her waitress shoes weren't made for running on uneven ground. She stumbled. Theron caught her without breaking stride. The purple light grew brighter. They rounded a corner and stopped. There it was, the runestone, a jagged piece of rock the size of a basketball covered in glowing symbols that looked like they'd been carved by something not human. It sat on a stone pedestal in the center of a circular chamber. The purple light pulsed in rhythm with the symbols. "Smash it," Ivy said. "The invisible fence goes down, right?" "Exactly." Theron raised the fire poker, prepared to bring it down on the stone. "Wait." The voice came from the shadows behind the runestone. A figure stepped into the purple light. Draven Sinclair, still in his white tuxedo, still looking like a groom ready for wedding photos. He was holding a smartphone. He turned the screen toward them. On it, a video feed, live, showing a small, modest apartment, outdated furniture, a recliner, a woman sitting in it knitting while watching television. Ivy's blood turned to ice. "Mom." The woman on the screen was Wren Harlow. Gray hair, reading glasses perched on her nose, completely unaware she was being watched. "Technically, her name is Wren." "Oh," Draven said smoothly. "She lives in Queens, 4th floor walk-up. Very cozy. I have a team standing outside her door right now. One phone call and they go in." Ivy dropped the candlestick. Her hand shook violently. Don't you touch her. I won't, Draven smiled. It was the expression of a man who knew he'd already won. As long as Theron drops his weapon, and as long as you, my dear Ivy, come here. Theron froze. He looked at the runestone, then at Ivy, then at Draven. He could destroy the stone right now, could escape. The ward would fall, and he'd be free to run. But if he did, Ren Harlow would die. Theron, don't listen to him. Ivy's voice cracked. She was crying now, couldn't help it. Couldn't stop. Don't. Theron lowered the poker. The iron clattered against the stone floor. Let her go, Draven. His voice was low, dangerous. This is between us, kings of the East. Leave the humans out of it. Oh, it is between us, Draven agreed. But she, he gestured to Ivy, is your weakness now. You bound yourself to her with that ring. Her pain is your pain. He snapped his fingers. 4 guards emerged from the shadows. They grabbed Theron. He didn't fight back, just looked at Ivy with an expression that conveyed desperate apology. 2 more guards grabbed Ivy, dragged her away from him. Lock him in the lower chamber, Draven commanded. Silver chains. I want him weak. I want him to watch while I marry his new bride. What? Ivy screamed, thrashing against the guards. You can't. Draven walked up to her, gripped her chin. His fingers were cold as corpse flesh. The ring you're wearing, my dear, doesn't just protect you. It grants the husband rights to the Ashcroft fortune and territory. Theron gave you his kingdom when he put that ring on your finger. And once I force you to marry me, that kingdom becomes mine. I will never marry you. Draven wiped the spit from his face calmly. You will. Or Ren and Queens gets a visit. And unlike Theron, I don't have a code of honor about feeding on the helpless. He gestured to the guards. Take her to the bridal suite. Get her cleaned up. We have a wedding to finish. As they dragged Ivy away, she looked back. Theron was on his knees, being chained with silver shackles that smoked against his skin. He met her eyes one last time, mouthed 2 words. Act like you're with me. Then the darkness swallowed him. The bridal suite smelled like decaying lilies and old dust. Ivy sat before a vanity mirror that was cracked down the center, splitting her reflection into 2 people. The terrified waitress and someone else, someone she didn't recognize yet. They had stripped her of the waitress uniform, dressed her in a vintage gown from a trunk, black lace and heavy silk, 1920s style with a dropped waist and beaded details that caught the light like tears. It fit perfectly, which only made it worse. Ivy stared at the black diamond on her finger. It was pulsing faster now, a frantic rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She tried to pull it off again. The metal had tightened until her finger went numb. The ring didn't want to let go. The door opened. Ivy didn't turn. She knew who it was by the sound of the footsteps. Heels on marble, slow, deliberate, angry. You look ridiculous. Cassandra Wolfe stood in the doorway, still in her white wedding gown, but the hem was muddy now, mascara running down her cheeks. She held a glass of dark red liquid, blood or wine, maybe both. She looked ready to kill. I didn't ask for this, Cassandra, Ivy said, her voice trembling but firm. I just wanted to serve appetizers and go home. Cassandra stalked into the room, slammed the door. She circled Ivy like a shark studying prey. Do you know how long I planned this wedding? At 2 years. The merger of the Sinclair and Wolfe lines. We were going to own New York, every territory from the Battery to the Bronx, and now Draven tosses me aside for a human. A food source. Ivy saw it then, the opening, the tiny, dangerous sliver of hope. He didn't toss you aside for me, Ivy said quietly. She turned to face Cassandra. He tossed you aside for power. Cassandra stopped, her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Think about it. Why does he want to marry me? Not because I'm beautiful or special, because I'm wearing Theron's ring. The ring grants dominion over Ashcroft territory. Once Draven marries me, he gets the ring. He gets the power. Ivy stood up, smoothed the black silk. And once he has Theron's power, does he need the Wolf shipping empire anymore? Does he need you? Cassandra went very still. The glass in her hand cracked. Blood wine seeped over her fingers. He's using you, Cassandra, Ivy pressed. She was gambling now. Everything on one throw. He's using your house, your guards, your reputation to steal a kingdom. And when he's done, you'll just be the ex-fiancé he discarded. You'll be nothing. Cassandra threw the glass against the wall. It shattered, leaving it a red stain that looked like a gunshot wound on the cream wallpaper. He has men outside your mother's apartment, she hissed. If you don't walk down that aisle, he makes a call. I know. Ivy felt tears sting her eyes. But those men, whose payroll are they on, Draven's or Wolfe's? Cassandra stared at her. Really looked at her for the first time. They're Wolf's security. My father's men. Then you can call them off. The air in the room grew heavy. Cassandra stood motionless, her mind racing. Ivy could see it happening, the calculations, the betrayal stacking up. The realization that Draven had been using her all along. For vampires, betrayal was currency. Draven had just devalued Cassandra's worth to zero. If I help you, Cassandra said slowly, her voice cold as Arctic ice. Theron owes me. The Ashcroft clan owes Wolf. I want the shipping territory back. I want what was promised. I can't speak for Theron, Ivy said. But if you don't help me, Draven wins everything and you get nothing. You become a footnote. A woman who was almost a queen. Cassandra was silent for a long minute. Then she pulled a phone from inside her corset, tapped the screen 3 times, held it to her ear. Stand down, she commanded. Her voice was absolute. The voice of someone born to rule. The target is off limits. If anyone touches a hair on Ren Harlow's head, I will have them flayed alive and fed to the dogs. Clear. She hung up, looked at Ivy with a smile that was somehow more terrifying than her anger. Your mother is safe, but you still have to walk down that aisle. What, Mama? Because Cassandra said, walking over and adjusting Ivy's veil with surprising gentleness. Draven is expecting a ceremony. We need him distracted. We need him close, and I want to see the look on his face when his perfect plan falls apart. She leaned in, her cold lips brushed Ivy's ear. Theron is in the crypt below us. My guards are bringing him up to the altar to witness the union. It's part of Draven's sick game. When you get there, when the priest asks if you take Draven Sinclair, she paused. Don't say I do. Say I claim the night. The what? Just say it, I claim the night. Trust me. Why should I trust you? Cassandra pulled back. Her eyes were hard, ancient, but there was something else there too. Something that looked almost like respect. Because right now I'm the only ally you have, and because I really, really want to see Draven lose. She walked to the door, paused. Don't it trip on the train, it would ruin the dramatic effect. Then she was gone. Ivy stood alone in the bridal suite. The dress weighed 1,000 pounds. The ring pulsed on her finger. I claim the night. What did that mean? Some kind of vampire law, a loophole in their ancient rules? She didn't know, but she was about to find out. The music wasn't a wedding march. It was a funeral dirge played on cellos. Deep, mournful, the sound of endings. Ivy walked out of the manor doors and into the cool night air. The ceremony was being held in the ruins of the old chapel on the estate grounds. A roofless stone structure open to the moon. Gothic arches framing empty sky. Rows of vampires stood in silence. Hundreds of them. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. Red, amber, silver, like animals watching from the tree line. They watched Ivy with hunger and curiosity. The human who trapped a king. At the end of the aisle, standing beneath a broken stone archway, was Draven. He wore a white suit that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Handsome, powerful, utterly certain of his victory, and kneeling beside him, chained to the stone floor, was Theron. Ivy's heart broke. He looked devastated. His shirt was torn. His skin was gray where the silver chains touched. They bound his wrists, his neck, his ankles. He was weak, starving. Every breath looked like it cost him. But when he saw Ivy in the black dress, his head snapped up. He didn't look defeated anymore. He looked furious. Ivy walked down the aisle. Each step felt like walking to an execution, her own or someone else's she didn't know. The vampires on either side of the aisle leaned in slightly as she passed, breathing in her scent, savoring it. She kept her eyes on Theron. Act like you're with me. She reached the altar. Draven stepped forward, offering his hand. He didn't look at her face. He looked straight at the ring on her finger. At the kingdom he was about to steal. You look breathtaking, my dear. The lie came smooth, ready to join the winning side. Ivy ignored his hand, stood next to Theron instead. She could feel the heat of his rage radiating from him like a furnace. Let's get this over with, Ivy said. Draven laughed. He turned to the crowd. We are gathered here to unite the Ashcroft and Sinclair lines. By the laws of the night, the possessions of the wife become the property of the husband. Tonight I claim the Ashcroft dominion. He turned to the priest, a gaunt figure in hooded robes, face hidden in shadow. Read the rites. The priest mumbled in Latin. Ivy didn't understand the words, but she felt the magic. The air grew thick. The ring on her finger began to burn, not just warm, hot, searing her skin. Do you, Ivy Harlow, take Draven Sinclair as your bonded mate? The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. Draven leaned in. His eyes flashed amber. Remember your mother. Ivy looked at him, then she looked past him into the shadows where Cassandra was standing arms crossed. The bride who was supposed to be at this altar, who was supposed to be marrying Draven. Cassandra gave a barely perceptible nod. Ivy looked down at Theron. He was watching her intently. He knew. Somehow he knew she had made a move, made an ally, changed the board. Ivy took a deep breath. She raised her hand, displayed the black diamond ring to the crowd of 300 vampires. I do not, she said clearly. The crowd gasped. Draven's smile vanished. What did you say? You stupid girl. He grabbed her wrist, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. I will kill her. I will kill your mother, right? She's safe, Ivy said. Her voice rang out with a confidence she didn't feel. Call your men. See if they answer. Draven froze. He pulled out his phone, dialed. Silence. He looked at Ivy with pure, undiluted hatred. You little... He raised his hand to strike her. Ivy didn't flinch. She looked him in the eye and screamed 4 words that Cassandra had taught her. I claim the night. The ring on her finger exploded with light. Not purple anymore. Dark violet. Deep as midnight. Deep as the space between stars. It wasn't just light. It was energy. Raw. Ancient. Powerful. It surged through Ivy's arm, not hurting her, flowing through her like she was a conduit, a channel, a living battery for a magic older than nations. The energy slammed into the ground, cracked the stone beneath her feet. The shockwave knocked Draven backward, threw him 15 feet through the air. He hit a pillar and crumpled. But the energy didn't dissipate. It saw it, searched, found what it was looking for. The blood connection. It flowed into Theron. He threw his head back and roared. The sound wasn't human, it was primal, ancient. The cry of something that ruled the night when humanity was still learning to make fire. The silver chains binding him began to hiss. Smoke rose where they touched his skin. Then they started to melt, turning to liquid slag, dripping away like water. The magic of the ring, amplified by Ivy's claims, shattered the bonds holding him. Theron stood. He didn't look weak anymore. The shadows around the altar seemed to wrap around him, moving, alive. They flowed over his wounds, healing them in seconds. His skin went from gray to pale. His eyes turned pitch black. No white, no iris, just endless dark. He looked like a god of vengeance. You wanted my kingdom, Draven. Theron's voice wasn't human anymore. It sounded like tectonic plates shifting, like the earth itself speaking. You should have asked the queen. Draven scrambled backward. His white suit was stained with dirt and blood. He looked at Ivy, at Theron, at Cassandra standing in the shadows with her arms crossed and a smile on her face. He realized too late that he'd been outmaneuvered. Kill them, he screamed to the crowd. Kill them both. $1 billion to whoever brings me his head. Half the crowd surged forward. Mercenaries, vampires loyal to Draven who cared more about money than law. But the other half stayed back, the older families. The traditionalists, they were watching the ring, watching Ivy, watching history being made. Behind me, Theron said to Ivy. No, Ivy said. She reached down, grabbed the jagged remains of a silver candelabra that had fallen during the explosion. It was heavy, awkward, but she held it like a weapon. She stood shoulder to shoulder with the Vampire King. I'm sick of hiding behind you. Theron looked at her, a genuine, terrifying smile spread across his face. That's my girl. The first wave of Draven's mercenaries hit them, and the battle for the East Coast began. It wasn't a fight, it was a massacre. The first vampire to reach Theron didn't even see the blow coming. One moment he was lunging forward, fangs extended, eyes bright with bloodlust. The next moment, his head was separating from his shoulders in a spray of dark arterial blood that looked black in the moonlight. Theron moved like poetry written in violence. Every motion was precise, economical, beautiful in the way a predator is beautiful. He didn't waste energy, didn't hesitate. His hands became weapons. Shadows coalesced around his fingers, solidifying into blades darker than the night itself. 3 vampires rushed him simultaneously. He spun. The shadow blade carved through the first one's torso, continued the arc, took the second one's arm off at the elbow, finished the rotation by driving his fist through the third one's chest. They fell like dominoes, but more came. 12. 2 dozen. Mercenaries who saw a $1 billion bounty and nothing else, who didn't care about ancient laws or vampire politics, who just wanted to get rich and didn't mind dying to do it. Ivy stood her ground. The silver candelabra was heavy and awkward, but she'd spent 5 years carrying trays that weighed twice as much. She knew how to use her core strength, how to pivot and swing without losing her balance. A vampire got too close. She swung the candelabra in a wide arc. The base connected with his temple. Silver on skin. The reaction was immediate. Smoke rose from the contact point, the smell of burning flesh. The vampire screamed and stumbled back, clutching his face. Another one lunged at her from the side. Ivy didn't think, just thrust the candelabra forward like a spear. The pointed end caught him in the throat. Not enough to kill a vampire, but enough to make him choke. Enough to slow him down. Theron was there instantly. Grabbed the vampire by the hair, snapped his neck with a single twist. "Stay close," he shouted over the chaos. "I am close." They moved together, back to back. Theron handling the ones who came in fast and violent. Ivy taking care of the stragglers who thought she'd be easy prey. The ring on her finger pulsed with each vampire that fell, growing warmer, brighter. It was protecting her. Every time a vampire got within striking distance, the ring would flare. A pulse of invisible force that knocked them back just enough for Ivy to swing the candelabra, just enough for Theron to finish them. The ring didn't just bind her to Theron, it made her dangerous. Draven watched from behind a pillar, his white suit stained with dirt and his own blood. His face was a mask of rage and disbelief. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to win. He was supposed to take the Ashcroft Kingdom and become the most powerful vampire on the East Coast. Instead, he was watching a waitress fight vampires with a candlestick and winning. "Cassandra!" he screamed. "Help me! We had a deal." Cassandra Wolf stepped out of the shadows. She wasn't wearing her wedding dress anymore. She'd changed into something darker, more practical. Black leather and silver buckles. Fighting clothes. She held a crossbow. Ancient, ornate, loaded with a bolt made of white oak. Draven's face lit up with relief. Finally, kill them. Kill Theron and that little... Cassandra adjusted her aim. 3 degrees to the left. Fired. The bolt flew through the air with a whistle like a scream. It didn't hit Theron, it hit Draven, straight through the shoulder, pinned him to the stone pillar behind him. He shrieked, clawed at the wooden shaft, but it was white oak, ancient and blessed. It wouldn't come out. Couldn't come out without taking half his shoulder with it. Cassandra lowered the crossbow, smiled. It was the expression of a woman who'd been waiting 2 years for this moment. "Sorry, darling," she drawled. "I don't marry losers." The tide turned. Seeing their leader pinned and bleeding, seeing the wolf brides switching sides, the mercenaries faltered. Some kept fighting. Most started backing away, reassessing, wondering if $1 billion was worth dying when the person offering the bounty was currently crucified to a pillar. Theron walked slowly toward Draven. The shadows followed him, moving across the ground like living smoke. The vampires who were still standing moved aside, created a path. Even the ones loyal to Draven knew better than to stand between a vampire king and his vengeance. Theron stopped inches from the pinned groom. Draven spat blood. His eyes glowed amber with rage and pain. "You can't kill me," Draven hissed. "The council will hunt you down. I have allies. I don't care about your allies." Theron's voice was quiet, calm, more terrifying than shouting. "I don't care about the council. I care about one thing." He turned, looked at Ivy. She was standing in the center of the ruined chapel holding a bent silver candelabra, wearing a black wedding dress stained with vampire blood. Her hair had come loose from its bun. Her face was scratched. She was shaking. But she hadn't run, hadn't hidden, hadn't screamed for help. She'd fought. "My queen," Theron said. "Do you have a preference on the sentencing?" Ivy looked at Draven, at the man who had threatened her mother, who had treated her like cattle, like a commodity to be bought and sold. She thought about everything he'd done, everything he'd planned to do. She could kill him. The ring gave her the power. One word and Theron would tear Draven apart. But that would make her like him. That would make her a monster. "I just want to go home," Ivy said tiredly. Her voice was small, human. "Get him out of my sight." Theron nodded. He looked at Cassandra. "He's all yours. Consider the debt paid." Cassandra smiled, a truly gruesome sight. All teeth and hunger and decades of rage finally given permission to surface. "Thank you, Theron. We have so much to discuss." Starting with his assets. She walked toward Draven. He tried to pull away from the pillar, tried to run, but the white oak bolt held him fast. Cassandra leaned in close, whispered something Ivy couldn't hear. Whatever it was made Draven's face go white. Theron didn't wait to watch. He turned to Ivy. The battle lust faded from his eyes, replaced by exhaustion and something softer. Something that looked almost like relief. He reached out, took her hand, the one with the ring. "You claimed the night," he whispered, sounding awed. Do you know what that means? No, Ivy admitted. Her adrenaline was crashing. She could feel it draining out of her like water from a broken glass. I just said what Cassandra told me to. It means, Theron lifted her hand to his lips, kissed the black diamond. You aren't just my wife anymore, Ivy. You just accidentally crowned yourself the High Queen of the East Coast vampires. Ivy stared at him. What? You conquered me. By vampire law, by the magic of the ring, by the words you spoke, you outrank me now. You're not just a queen, you're the queen, the final authority. But I'm human. Not entirely, not anymore. Before she could respond, the world tilted sideways. Ivy's knees buckled. The adrenaline crash hit like a freight train. Everything went gray at the edges. Theron caught her before she hit the ground, scooped her up into his arms effortlessly. She weighed nothing to him. Less than nothing. Sleep, he commanded softly. His voice was gentle now, almost tender. I've got you. Nobody touches you now. Not ever again. And for the first time that night, Ivy believed him. She closed her eyes. Let the darkness take her. Ivy woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of absolute silence. For a moment, she panicked, thrashed in the bed, expecting cold stone floors and the damp walls of a crypt, expecting vampires and blood and death. Instead, her hands found sheets made of Egyptian cotton, so soft they felt like water. She sat up gasping. The room was enormous, the size of her entire queen's apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline at dusk. The city was waking up, lights flickering on like distant stars. Easy, a voice said from the balcony. Theron. He stood by the open glass doors backlit by the dying sun. He wasn't wearing the bloodied tuxedo anymore. Dark jeans, black cashmere sweater, looking deceptively human except for the way he moved. Too graceful, too still. He held a mug of coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other. You've been asleep for 18 hours, he said. Cassandra gave you a sedative. It was necessary. Your body was in shock. Ivy checked herself. She was wearing an oversized silk shirt that wasn't hers. Soft gray, expensive. She looked at her hand. The black diamond ring was still there. It looked dormant now, just a heavy, expensive piece of jewelry. Not a weapon of mass destruction, but she could still feel it. A low hum against her skin, a connection to something vast and ancient. My mother. Ivy's throat was dry, raw from screaming. Safe. Theron walked into the room, set the coffee on the nightstand beside her. She's currently in a 5-star hotel in Midtown under the impression she won a sweepstakes. All expenses paid vacation. She thinks you're on a corporate retreat for work. She's fine, Ivy. I have 4 guards on her floor. Invisible to human eyes. Nothing will touch her. Ivy grabbed the coffee, drank it greedily. The caffeine hit her system like a kickstart to a dead battery. So it's over, she said, putting the mug down. Draven is gone. Cassandra has her revenge, and she looked at the ring. I need to figure out how to get this off so I can go home. Theron pulled a chair over, sat opposite her. He looked tired, but his eyes were intense, focused completely on her. About that, he started, ran a hand through his hair. We have a problem. Ivy's stomach dropped. What problem? You're safe. You are the safest person in New York City right now. Probably the entire eastern seaboard. Theron leaned forward. The problem is the title. When you shouted, I claim the night at the altar, you invoked an ancient succession law. You didn't just save me, Ivy. You conquered me. Ivy laughed nervously. Okay, very funny. I'm a waitress, Theron. I serve crab cakes for a living. I don't conquer vampire kings. The magic doesn't care about your day job. His expression was completely serious. The ring accepted you. The words were spoken in front of 300 witnesses. The council has already convened. As of sunrise this morning, you are recognized as the matriarch of the Ashcroft clan. Technically, you outrank me. Ivy stared at him. The absurdity of it washed over her like a wave. I outrank you. Yes. I can give you orders. Technically, yes, though I'd prefer if you didn't. A hint of a smile. I'm not great with authority. This is insane. Welcome to vampire politics. Ivy slumped back against the pillows. So what happens if I leave, if I just walk away? Theron's expression darkened. If you leave, the clan weakens. The bond we share through the ring, it's not just symbolic. It's actual power. Your life force is tied to mine. If you renounce the title, the vacuum of power will cause a civil war. Draven's supporters are scattered, but they're waiting, watching for any sign of weakness. If you walk away, he paused. The streets of New York will run red, Humans will die, thousands of them, maybe more. So I'm a prisoner, just a different kind of prisoner. No, Theron's voice was sharp, urgent. He leaned forward even more. You are not a prisoner. I can perform a ritual to sever the bond. It will hurt. It will cost me half my strength. But I can do it. You can walk out that door with the $10 million I promised you. You can go back to your life. Your mother will be taken care of. You'll never have to see me again. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. Is that what you want Ivy to go back to serving drinks to people who don't even look you in the eye? Ivy looked out the window. At the city, she thought about her life before last night. The double shifts, the aching feet, the constant worry about money, the feeling of being invisible, of being furniture with a pulse. Then she thought about the moment in the chapel, the power surging through her veins, the way the vampires had stepped back in fear, the way Theron had looked at her with something that might have been pride. If I stay, Ivy asked quietly, what happens? We rule. Theron said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I handle the violence. You handle the politics. And trust me, you have an instinct for it, Ivy. You played Cassandra Wolf like a master strategist. You bluffed a room full of monsters. You stood your ground when anyone else would have run. He reached out. His hand hovered over hers, not touching, asking permission. You have the heart of a queen. He added, his voice dropping to a whisper. And you wouldn't have to act like you're with me anymore, because I would very much like it to be real. Ivy looked at his hand, the cold, dangerous hand of a killer who had treated her with more respect in 24 hours than any human man had in her entire life. Who had given her choices? Who had asked instead of demanded? She thought about the contract, the money, the freedom it would buy. Then she thought about something else. The contract said 10 million, Ivy said. Theron blinked, surprised by the pivot. Yes, it's already in your account. I transferred it this morning. I want 20. Theron's eyebrows shot up. A slow grin spread across his face. And Ivy sat up straighter, met his eyes. I don't want to be a figurehead. If I'm the matriarch, I want a real seat at the table. I want to know where the money comes from. I want to know the laws. I want to understand how this world works. And I want full medical coverage for my mother. Best doctors, best care, forever. Theron laughed. It was a genuine warm sound that transformed his face, made him look younger, almost human. Done, he said. Anything else? Ivy looked at the ring on her finger, twisted it. It didn't hurt anymore. It felt right, like it belonged there. Just one thing, she said. She swung her legs out of bed, stood up, walked over to Theron and grabbed the lapels of his sweater, pulled him up so they were face to face. If you ever try to protect me by locking me in a library again, I will stake you myself, understood? Theron's hands went to her waist, pulled her flush against him. She could feel the unnatural cold of his body, but it didn't frighten her anymore. Understood, my queen, he murmured. His lips were inches from hers. Shall we go get some breakfast? I believe there's a council meeting at midnight. We shouldn't be late. Let them wait, Ivy whispered, and she kissed him. It wasn't a fake kiss for an audience. It was deep, hungry, real. His lips were cold, but they warmed against hers. His hands tightened on her waist, pulling her closer. For the first time in her life, Ivy didn't feel invisible. She felt infinite, 3 months later. The social scene in New York had changed, subtly. The kind of change that most humans wouldn't notice, but that sent ripples through the supernatural world. The weddings were quieter. The business deals were fairer. The mysterious disappearances that had plagued certain neighborhoods for decades, they stopped. And at the center of it all was the new power couple of the East Coast. Ivy stood on the balcony of Blackwood Estate. It wasn't called Blackwood anymore. The deed had been transferred back to its original owner. Now it was the Ashcroft Summer Estate, the name carved into new stone above the gates. The ballroom behind her was filled with guests, but the vibe was different from that horrible night 3 months ago. There was laughter now, music that didn't sound like a funeral, vampires and humans mixing freely under new laws that Ivy had helped write. No feeding without consent, no glamoring humans into compliance, no treating people like livestock. The old families had resisted at first, but Ivy had learned quickly. She discovered that being human gave her an advantage. She understood what humans wanted, what they feared, how to negotiate protections that actually worked. And she had Theron's full support, his strength, his network, his absolute refusal to let anyone disrespect his queen. You're brooding. Ivy turned. Theron was leaning against the stone railing, holding 2 glasses of champagne. Real champagne this time, not blood. I'm not brooding, she smiled. I'm observing. Rourke is yelling at the new sous chef. Rourke is a tyrant. Ivy took the offered glass, but the crab cakes are excellent. Theron stepped closer, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. The night air was cool, but Ivy didn't feel cold. The ring on her finger kept her warm, a constant, low thrum of power and connection. Do you regret it? Theron asked, looking out over the dark forest where they'd once run for their lives. The normal life. Ivy took a sip of champagne. She looked at the man who would tear the world apart for her, at the kingdom she now commanded with a grace that surprised even her, at the power she'd discovered in herself. Not magical power, the power of knowing her own worth. Normal is overrated, Ivy said. She clinked her glass against his. Long live the queen. Theron smiled. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Long live the queen. They stood together on the balcony, king and queen, vampire and human. Monsters and allies gathered in the ballroom behind them, celebrating a new era. A better era. Ivy looked at the ring on her finger. 3 months ago, she'd been a waitress. Invisible. Struggling to pay rent. Drowning in debt. Now she was the most powerful woman on the East Coast. Not because of magic. Not because of the ring. Because she'd refused to stay invisible. She'd refused to accept that her worth was determined by other people's perception of her. She thought about that night. The champagne glass bouncing on the Persian rug. The moment Theron grabbed her wrist and whispered those 7 words. Act like you belong to me. She'd been acting then, pretending to be someone's lover to survive. But somewhere along the way, it had stopped being an act. Theron, Ivy asked quietly. Yes. That wedding, the one at Blackwood Estate, the one I was hired to serve at. What about it? Ivy smiled, set down her champagne glass, turned to face him fully. I just realized something. Cassandra and Draven never actually got married. The ceremony never finished. But you and I, she held up her hand. The black diamond caught the moonlight. We did, with 300 witnesses, under ancient vampire law. Theron's expression shifted. Understanding dawned. You know what that means, Ivy continued. That wedding I was hired for, turns out I was the bride all along. I just didn't know it yet. Theron laughed, pulled her close, kissed her forehead. Smartest decision I ever made, he murmured. You didn't decide. I conquered you, remember? Best day of my 200-year life. Behind them inside the ballroom, someone called for a toast. Ivy could hear glasses clinking, voices rising in celebration. The sound of a world that was slowly, carefully learning to be better. She'd done that. A waitress from Queens with student debt and a sick mother. She'd changed the rules, rewritten the laws, made monsters remember they'd once been human. And she'd done it without losing herself. Ready to go back inside, Theron asked. They'll want to see the queen. Let them wait, Ivy said. She looked out at the estate, at the forest, at the chapel ruins where she'd claimed the night and conquered a king. I want to stand here a little longer. I want to remember what it felt like to be invisible. So I never forget why I fought to be seen. Theron said nothing, just held her. Let her have the moment. In the distance, a wolf howled, or maybe it was something else, something older, but it didn't frighten Ivy anymore. She understood now. The monsters weren't the things that lived in the dark. The monsters were the people who treated others as less than human, who saw waitresses and decided they were invisible, who looked at a young woman struggling to survive and saw nothing worth protecting. Those were the real monsters. And Ivy had spent 3 months systematically removing them from power. You know what the best part is? Ivy asked. What? Draven thought he could buy me, use me, treat me like property. She smiled. But the ring doesn't work that way. It doesn't bind people who are forced. It binds people who choose. I chose to put it on. I chose to say the words. I chose to fight. She looked at Theron, at the vampire king who had given her a choice when he could have just taken what he wanted. I chose you. And Theron said softly, will spend every night of my immortal life being worthy of that choice. Inside the ballroom, the music changed, something slower, more intimate, a waltz. Theron offered his hand. May I have this dance, my queen? Ivy took it. Let him lead her back inside. Back to the world of politics and power and ancient laws. Back to the life she'd chosen. As they danced, she caught sight of herself in one of the silver back mirrors. The same mirrors that had shown her the truth 3 months ago. That had revealed the monsters hiding behind glamours. But this time her reflection showed exactly what was there. No glamour, no illusion, just Ivy Harlow, 26 years old, former waitress, current queen, human, powerful, real, and absolutely, utterly visible. The music swelled. The vampires and humans danced together under chandeliers that no longer felt threatening. And in the center of it all, Ivy Harlow Ashcroft stood with the man who had changed her life by asking her to act. She'd acted, she'd conquered, and she'd won. Not because she was the strongest or the most beautiful or the most powerful, but because when the world told her she was invisible, she refused to believe it. And that made all the difference.